I'm Greg, and I am continuing my tradition of giving not technical talks here. Sorry. It's not about the CVEs, but now about legal stuff. Talking at lunch yesterday, it's like the world, you never expect to be dealing with lawyers and things like that when you start out programming, but here I am. This is all my personal opinion. Again, I am part of the CRA, the EU working group of experts to help guide it and work with it in something that's actually palatable and can be used. I'm just going to be talking about us as open source contributors and maintainers, not as a manufacturer, not as a company, not as something we get paid to do, because that's a whole nother side of the CRA that companies, lawyers, and legal people can handle, and that's a whole lot more work. So please interrupt, ask questions. I'm here for you for this. I gave a talk about this at the Embedded Recipes about 4 or 5 months ago, and this is an updated one because things keep changing. There are lots of 3-letter acronyms in the CRA. You guys can see them all. The most important one is the PDE. Products with digital elements. All that means is something with software in it. That's it. It's very common, used. I always forget it all the time. And then the other ones are important, software bill of materials. But PDE is the new one that they made up. You'll see that a lot over the next couple of years. CRA is really actually just a simple thing. Continuing the Kernel Recipes idea, it's just a list of software ingredients that's in something. Before, companies would ship software in devices and never have to say what it is, never have to update it, never have to describe it. Think of it as ingredients in a recipe. Think of it as the chemicals in a paint that's in a device, things like that. So now companies have to document this. And they want to make sure that those ingredients in there are safe, that the software is up to date, the software is going to be secure, things like that. There's risk management involved, all sorts of fun things like that. And that's it. That's all, the whole goal of the CRA. It's a good goal. The cool thing is now they're actually going to describe, all companies are going to have to describe all the open source software that they use. So they finally have to admit what they're doing, which is good for us. They can show that they're actually using Linux, they're using all these other things, and the world will see. I think that's a good thing. Overall, I think the CRA is a good thing. I think it's going to help us in the end. Companies are going to have to come to us for a community-wide to get help, and communities are going to grow and survive and get better. More specifically, it's an EU regulation covering software in the EU market. If you're not in the EU, why do you care? Well, putting things on the market means putting them on the internet. And the internet is available in the EU, so it affects the whole world. It's kind of weird that way that US and Japanese-based companies are going to be affected, but they will. The EU, when they tried to create this law, they didn't want to carve out open source and just make it such that nobody, if you just release code open source, you weren't obligated to do anything anymore. They wanted companies that produced open source to be responsible. So they tried to fit open source into a way that was not going to be too bad for us, but yet didn't relieve us of all our duties. So it's kind of fitting things in a little weird way. They're still working out some of the details, and I'll talk about that. Product classification, devices that are classified as different types. It covers devices that are operating systems, bootloaders, hypervisors, network devices. It carves out things like laptops are not included, I think. Chromebooks are included, sorry. Cloud services are not, so you don't have to worry about that. Automobiles are not, those are covered by different EU laws. Power plants are not. Governmental, other things are not, but mostly just software and devices that are pretty much the most common thing, but not web services. Web services got a fun carve out. And then there's market surveillance and enforcement. Enforcement means that you just have to report to the government what you're doing. I don't know, if you're a manufacturer, they can try and come after you and impose fines eventually. But for us, enforcement just means they're going to give a stern talking to. And surveillance means just watching what happens in the market. These are the common EU terms. It isn't like government surveillance, it's just they're watching to see that you're reporting things properly. And these groups that do market surveillance are things that we deal with today. They're the cybersecurity incident response teams, they're ANISA, which is the the EU version of what MITRE does. CSERTs are interesting. Every EU country has at least one, but doesn't seem to go by the size of the country. Famously, Germany has one, and the Netherlands has 3. I don't know why. CSERTs are going to be fit into this thing in such that they're going to have to be reported to about when something goes wrong. Same thing with ANISA. ANISA is going to be a reporting agency. ANISA is trying to work with CVEs. CVEs are run by MITRE, which is funded by the US government, and there's some whole work that's going on with there. CVE famously almost shut down a few months ago. Now it's back. We'll know more about what CVE is going to happening by the end of the year. All these companies and countries are trying to work together and come up with something simple. We don't want to be reporting bugs, security bugs, to multiple places in the world and try and track those around the place. So they're going to come up with something unified. The right people are talking to each other, so that's a good idea. And it's also, CRA is also a requirement for the security portions of your software lifecycle. When you're making a device, there's a specification that's being written on talking about what risks are involved. So if you have an operating system in there, you can't just let anybody log in and have access to everything. It's going to say you must have access control and things like that. If you do have access control, you have to have logging and keep the logs, things like that. So these are good requirements that are coming out. There's specifications being written. We're involved in the specifications. Some kernel people are involved. We're watching what's happening there. And reporting vulnerabilities, reporting bugs. When we get notified of a bug, a manufacturer has X number of days to report it and fix it. That X is being argued about how fast they have to fix it, but it's up to the manufacturer. It's not up to us as an open source group, which is good. We are going to have some requirements as far as what happens when we get reported a bug, but we don't have to fix it. Manufacturers or use our software cannot tell us what to do. So don't worry about that. We give open source software to the world, and we don't dictate use. So we don't know how they use it, so sometimes we can't determine if they're using it in an insecure or secure way. It's up to the user to do that. So they can't complain to us when things break. They can complain, but we're under no obligation to fix it, which is good. They're under the obligation to fix it. Now, ideally, we can take their fix and help them, but we're not required to. So don't be worried that some company is going to come to you and say, you must fix this now because it's a CRA issue. They will, and you can go tell them to just go away. I'm going to have a whole bunch of form letters that I'm going to give to everybody that we can just send out. It's good. Along those lines, software lifecycle, risk management, design, development, documentation. These devices are now going to have to document that they use our stuff. There's going to be a software bill of materials that's in some common standard that they're still arguing about. They'll probably come up with a third one. There's 2 common ones now. And production, how they produce the stuff, how they use it, how they keep these devices up to date over the life cycle of the device. And that's good. These are good things. Again, we're going to see all the open source software that's being used. These software bill of materials are hopefully going to be public. If you have a device, you'll know what's in them. This is good. And there's different types of products, default, level 1, 2, and critical. Critical is operating system, so yay, we're critical. People are arguing the definition of an operating system, which is an academic description that's never been documented really well. The first couple cuts of that ended up including like Perl and Bash accidentally. Because, they can create jobs, access to resources. They're trying to narrow it down. As far as we're concerned, yeah, Linux is operating system, great. But it's also a hypervisor, and it's also a bootloader, which is fun. So if you look in the specifications for bootloaders and hypervisors, now they say, if your bootloader can also be an operating system, go read the operating system one. So, which is nice to see. They're not calling us out. But the fun thing is, like your phone has like 4 types of bootloaders before it runs Linux. So all those bootloaders are actually finally going to be covered. You're going to have to be documented, see what's in them, see what's being used. So it's good. Bootloaders are good. Again, outside the scope, Web services, automobiles. There was an argument over electric bikes for a while, whether electric bikes were considered automobile or not. I don't know where that went. Turns out a lot of electric bikes run Zephyr and Linux. I didn't know that, but they do. Marines, aeronautical, medical, those are things. And then non-commercial hobby products. So anything that we do, release open source, not covered. Don't have to worry about it. But commercial is kind of interesting. If somebody takes that, then it's commercial. So when your software gets added to a product, then you're accidentally covered. And because of that, there's different classifications of how you are covered and some words of that. So open source developers, open source stewards, and I'll talk about that, manufacturers, integrators, distributors. So ignore the bottom three. Those are kind of obvious. Those are companies. If you're a consulting company, you are a manufacturer, so you will have to be covered with that. But a steward and developer. So a developer is usually an individual. A steward could be an individual. And here's this presentation from the EU group to FOSDEM a couple years ago, and follow the flow chart down. So this is the fun thing. If you're providing open source, not getting paid, don't worry about it. If you're contributing, don't care. Providing, okay, and getting paid, no, not in scope. Directly monetizing it, yes, you're selling a product. But if you're like a foundation, like Apache or Linux Foundation or Mozilla or Google's Android open source project, are you a legal person? Yes, then you're a steward. No, not in scope. Good, we're legal persons. The fun thing is that term legal person. Legal person is weird. Different countries define a legal person as different things. They wrote it in their law, says legal person, and then they say natural person in a few spots. Natural persons are us as individuals. Legal persons are us as individuals and companies in some parts of the world. They're arguing this over. Hopefully, we have a meeting in October. They will come to a clarity. Ideally, legal persons is just going to be an organization. So Linux Foundation is a legal person. I am not a legal person under that. So the legal person, the steward, would be the Linux Foundation. Legal person would be Mozilla. The legal person would not be the Mozilla release manager. Good. I want the organization to be responsible and not me. So that was the goal. It's supposed to not be an individual. Hopefully it remains not an individual. That's their goal. So they have to worry and mess with the words. So individuals, everybody here, we're not stewards, everybody's happy. Some of us work for stewards, then we can do some stuff. And if you are a steward, you do have a responsibility. So a steward of a project, regular normal open source project, don't have to worry about it if you actually have a legal entity for it. All you have to do is two things. This is it. The CRA only requires this. Have a readme.txt that says who to email for security issues, and report security issues to something. That's something still being worked out. That's it. When people get worried about the CRA, this is all we have to care about. They can't tell us what to do. They can't force us to do stuff. They will report, manufacturers will report bugs to us. We don't even have to do anything with them. That's it. That's all we have to do. So don't be afraid of the CRA. These are things you should be doing anyway. If you don't do this anyway, I mean, you don't really have a good project, but hey, come on. That's it. Email, report security fixes. Any complaints? You still complain? No. That's it. So that's it. And you should be doing this. Come on. Most projects doing this. Ideally, you should be reporting CVE bugs today if you want to. You can become a CNA. You can start reporting bugs in a simple way. Or you can fill out a web form to get a CVE. There's a best practices dev checklist to say I've followed the best practices for my project. You guys should be using this. DevSFE has run a really cool tool called Reuse that you can run it and generates the software bill of materials and all the information, and boom, your project does it. These tools are out there today. Use them. Project should be doing that. And that's it. That's all you got to worry about. Now, the details kind of get complex, and some companies trying to make it a little more complicated. We came up with a steward's checklist, and this is being distilled down. OpenSSF has done this. They're distilling this down to a one single page white paper and a 5-page, a little more detailed stuff. I'll be publishing it later, or OpenSSF will be publishing it later. But the checklist has a few more things on there, but really it's all just those 2 things. That's all you need to care about. So, complaints, questions? Yeah, well, news too good to be true.
I think we've all seen the clueless companies contacting various different open source projects and saying, you need to certify to us that you follow the following blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
I have 2 questions. One, do we have an official form letter? And 2, what's the funniest unofficial response you've seen so far?
So famously, Emerson hit all open source projects and said, please fill out this big long form for me. And you can just tell them to go, fuck off. You have no responsibility to do that. They're trying to get you to do your work for them. It's going to get worse. Companies are coming after you. I will create a little form letter and say, here's what you need to send off. And I did that for the Emerson people because they approached many open source projects, ended up on one of the kernel lists. Do this. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Why do you think we have to do this? And then they never wrote back, and then I persisted, and they're like, oh, no, you're right, we covered this, so. We will come up with a nice form letter, and it's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse, because it's coming soon for companies. The deadline, went into force, this is the way the EU works, then you have a number of years before it actually happens to be enforced or followed. Government will be ready, supposedly, by June 11th, working on the reporting thing. The assessment values are ready. Open source, we don't have to worry about anything yet. This is when we start having to worry about stuff. Manufacturers are going to care in September of next year. They're going to start panicking about summer of next year, and things are going to start hitting the fan. We don't care. We don't have to do anything as open source stewards or contributors for another full year. We're not responsible for anything. That's the only point in time we have to put our little README in the file and say, here's how you contact us. So they're going to be panicking by that point in time. I'll have a white form and I'll have something out for everybody can do. We'll make it very obvious. Companies, this is your responsibility. You're using our software. You're responsible for this stuff now, not us. So it'll get worse. Curl has already been hit a lot. The fun thing about curl is a lot of consultants are saying, hey, pay me, which is great. You can say pay me and do this work. I will do this work for certification and fill out all the forms, but then you become a manufacturer. When you do that, and you must follow the rules of manufacturers, which Daniel from Curl is going to do, which is great, but be aware then you have an obligation to follow those rules at that point in time.
I'm wondering if it will not have a negative effect on the principle of sharing software. For example, you can share software for educational purpose, and just the fact of publishing some software, as you said, you only have to provide security.txt and blah, blah, blah. In my opinion, it's already like a French bureaucracy. I mean that just in order to publish some code and be fine with this, you have to go through something complicated and heavy just for nothing. I mean, if I'm just publishing something under an MIT license, which already says it does not guarantee any fitness for any purpose or whatever, I don't see why it would be necessary to still go further and explain where to report security issues or whatever. Imagine just posting some code in a magazine.
You don't. So if you were just publishing software, you're not part of a legal entity that handles your lawyer and other issues, nothing matters. But you can publish on GitHub, you can publish on your own personal website, doesn't matter.
If I publish some code in a magazine and I am paid for the article, it's probably in the gray area.
No, okay, so yeah, if you get paid, that's the other interesting thing. You're not monetizing the product, and you're not a legal person. Mm-hmm. You're just getting paid to write an article, you're getting paid. No, the goal is not. It's not going to be an issue there. So it should not be covered, it should not be problem. That's their goal, and this is what they keep saying. We're writing more stuff out in the rules. But yeah, if you're publishing, not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Steven. Yeah, I'd like to go back on this. On what does it mean to be a manufacturer? I mean, Willie talked about the example of I don't know, publishing an article. Let's say I'm doing consulting, or my employer is paying me to contribute to an open source project. At which point, where is the limit? At which point am I monetizing the project versus, just using the project and making money out of it in some way?
So that's good. So you getting paid to contribute to a project? No, not a problem. You're a contributor. You're just a contributor. Doesn't matter.
Okay, now I'm an independent contributor. I'm a freelance. Someone's paying me.
Either way.
Yeah.
Either way is fine. If you are working to, I'll use Curl as an example, he's a consultant to provide services for Curl, then he is a manufacturer at that point. He's directly monetizing his use of the product. So yes, consulting companies will become manufacturers. But the company is, not the individual. Now, if you are a one-person company, that's a fun thing, but your company is a legal person and is doing that. And each EU country has rules about self-employment and companies like that. So they're the ones responsible for that. So manufacturers, there are a little more strict rules. The cool part about manufacturer rules, if you're doing consulting and whatnot, it isn't that bad. You just have to be noted when you're found out that there's a bug, you have to fix it, you have to try and provide a fix, you have to report that there was bugs, you have to provide software bill of materials. It's not that bad. It gets a little more hairier when you're actually shipping hardware devices. You have to keep those devices up to date, some other things like that. This isn't a bad thing. The rest of the world has had to do this for physical devices for a very long time. If you made paint, if you were a baker, you had these same type of rules. Same idea.
Let me give you another example. Let's say I'm consulting, I have expert services, I don't know, in special area of the kernel. And so I'm consulting specifically on this and making money out of this. So would I be a manufacturer in this case?
So you're consulting for not the project. So it is gray areas. They're coming out with documentation to explain this a lot better. The goal is no, you're not an issue. You're providing consulting services for a manufacturer, then they're the manufacturer. That actually gets shipped out at the end. Now, you might have a contract with them that says you have to be responsible for the CRA issues that are reported, but that's up to that manufacturer type thing. The goal is no. Consulting shouldn't be that, but consulting services, I'll call it Bay Libra. Yes, you will be considered a manufacturer for some of the work you do. You have to follow those rules. Again, it shouldn't be that hard. You guys should be doing most of this stuff already. Anyway.
But for example, if you go back to Bay Libra, let's say they want to provide fixes, they can publish patches, but they won't be able to put them upstream depending on whether...
There's no requirement to go upstream.
Okay. Yeah.
So hardware or a manufacturer has to report bugs, and I think they're going to be required to publish those fixes and send them upstream. It's not required for upstream to take them.
What happens with the next version? I mean, do I need to update the patches?
Yeah, you have to update. I mean, you have to update patches like always. Yes. Yeah, I mean, this handles the dead project thing. So projects can be dead, still be covered under the CRA because they're not publishing anything new like libxml2, right? It's going to be fine. People post patches somewhere and they sit there, but it's okay.
Thanks.
Just some clarifications. So when you said what we should always be doing with the, I just want to make sure I don't have echo here, but just make sure that we always should be posting the security bug fixes and stuff like that. Is there now, say like for now, like I know for my own personal projects, I have a bug report. Please report bugs here. Now do you, if you were to follow this requirements, maybe I don't need to because I'm...
You don't.
I know, but you're saying anyone should be doing it anyway. But just saying this, I guess it's important project that you're just saying, like here if I use internally, Google helps, funds me to make something. I just post it for other people to use, but it's like you could use it if you want, but I'm not making money off of sending that. But just going back to the clarification, even if I were to decide to do that or something like that, where you said the security, please report security. Now, do you have to have a distinguish between bug reports and security fix, or like you said here, please provide a contact for security issues and report security fixes to something. You have to have that as a separate entity or a separate statement, as instead of saying I have please report bugs here. From Linus's, all bugs are security bugs, but.
No, it's the same. That should be fine. I mean, you can say, please report bugs and security vulnerabilities to, come on.
So I wasn't sure if there was like some rule that said you have to say security fixes.
That's a good question. I'll look that up. I don't know.
Okay.
You should, shouldn't be that big.
So what about open source projects that receive donations?
So open source projects that receive donations is a steward because they are a legal entity that can receive money, right? You have to have a legal entity that can receive money. I mean, famously, many, many years ago, Linux USB got a donation from Slashdot, and we had no idea what to do with it because we weren't a legal entity and we couldn't take the money. So if you have a legal entity, then yes, you are a steward, and you follow the requirements of steward. Now, again, this is all you have to do. If you're a steward, it isn't that much. So it isn't a problem. It shouldn't be a problem.
I have a practical question. Who enforces those rules and what are the sanctions?
Who enforces the rules? That is a good question. That's something they're still working out. We will know in June of next year how that works out. I don't know. I have not been paying attention. As written, the law, it's a self-reporting law. So it's probably going to be something like you can see, you get a CE mark on devices today. It's going to be something like that. You get a CRA mark somehow for manufacturers. Stewards don't have to worry about that. Manufacturers have to worry about that. Stewards, and what are I don't know what the penalties are going to be. I do not know.
But because depending on the country you're living in, it's going to be probably very different.
Yeah.
So there's going to be like dream countries for those things. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, the requirements for being a steward are so low, it should not be an issue for us. Seriously, I would argue any projects should be doing that today. Maybe then it'll be like, okay, you can't get a CRA mark if you're using that software because they're in violation, and your software will be taken off the market of the EU for that. That's up to you. I do not know. We'll know more.
I'm not entirely sure what differentiates a steward from a manufacturer. Like, for example, my case, I get donations from 5 companies to maintain open source. I must be legally a freelance in Spain, which is a legal person, to receive the donations. Am I a steward? Am I a manufacturer? Why?
There are some rules coming out that are going to make that more obvious. Again, the consulting rule, it's a fine line. Their goal is you would be a steward. Okay. That's the goal, and they're trying to get that. Again, the wording is very vague right now. It's actually wrong in places. They're going to try and fix that up by publishing some stuff. We'll get there. I've seen some drafts of some of the documents that they're working on. It's going to make this much, much clearer. Directly, the goal is for devices, but the goal also was so that big companies are just releasing open source can't hide. So that's the other side of that, which is good. So,
thank you.
They're not trying to screw us over. They're trying to be good. The people involved understand open source, and they realize that this is a good thing, which is good.
So is there any exception to this process for companies in scope? Like they could say they're protecting trade secrets or something?
Any exceptions? No. As far as I know, unless the type of device. Again, automotive has different rules. Aeronautical has different rules. Power plants have different rules. But no, as far as I know, no. I don't know how open the SBOMs are going to be, whether they're published to the world or only to the customer. If you buy the thing, I don't know how that's going to go. But in general, no, these are not, software is not a trade secret, right? It's going to get interesting when you get a vulnerability report. If you're a manufacturer and you get a vulnerability reported to you, you have to fix it within X number of days. And then you have to report that vulnerability. That's a good thing. That has not been the case today. And that's going to affect, I think that's going to really, really make things interesting with microcode on CPUs. Because today we have embargoes of 8, 12, 18 months long. That's not going to happen in the future. Microcode is software. It's firmware. That's going to be, I'm very happy about that.
Don't you think that instead a label would work better? I would say, for example, this product complies with the CRA, or this one does not, and just be done with this. Because ultimately it would be the customer who chooses what they buy, and there would be an incentive for manufacturers to include only CRA-compliant software in it, and probably avoid those software which they don't know the origin or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's going to come down. Companies that sell software is going to be the interesting. They're going to have to be compliant, and yeah, they can only sell software into the EU that is compliant. So if you're picking open source software can become compliant by virtue of the manufacturer that uses it automatically. So it's not up to anybody else to make our open source software CRA compliant. It's up to the manufacturer. And then again, steward, 2 things, report bugs, email address.
Yes, but in any case, I mean that I don't have examples in mind, but for some small products which bring no special value, just setting everything like this in place can cost a lot and make the final product not affordable anymore.
Yeah, and ideally, so best practices.dev for a long time has been out there. You get a little badge for your project, whether it's silver, gold, platinum, or whatever. Whether you follow the best open source practices for security and other things, that should be a little badge and a little idea for companies to follow today. I think you can even get a bronze and still meet the CRA rules. So yes, ideally, if you're putting together a product, you should be paying attention to that. You're going to have to pay attention to that now. So it's not bad.
Hello. I had a quick question about electronics as a hobby. People shipping, I don't know, kits of Arduinos using, open source software running on it. Does that make you a manufacturer? What limit is there to, for that hobby qualifier?
Well, you're not a hobby if you're getting paid if somebody's sending you money for something.
Like from the very first one you would sell on eBay because you had a few spare.
You're a manufacturer. You put it on the market in the EU. Yeah, you have to meet the CE mark today to do that. Same idea.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So open source stuff shouldn't be that hard. But yes.
So I'm thinking about the manufacturer's point of view here, and I'm wondering about this requirement to remediate security vulnerabilities within a fixed amount of time. Of course, one of the main reasons we use third-party software is because we don't have the core competency in all areas. And so I'm just thinking about what happens if a vulnerability is reported, but then also the developers of the project, as you said, don't have a responsibility to do anything. So I'm just kind of wondering where that leaves a manufacturer if they need to respond to this in a fixed amount of time and don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do that.
Yeah, it makes manufacturers need to pick their software that they're using a little more carefully. I mean, yeah, but you've always had that problem today. You just have been ignoring it. And now it's putting into law saying you can't do foolish things like that. To be fair, most open source projects are going to be fine. Yeah, reported to me. In the early drafts of the law, they were like, open source stewards have to respond in X number of days to vulnerabilities, until I pointed out that like my EU employment contract keeps me from working on weekends. I only work so many days per week. And they're like, oh, we cannot go against EU work laws. So manufacturers have different rules than individuals. So again, yes, manufacturers now have to take responsibility for all the software they put in a product. Whether they have the core competence or not, that's up to them because they chose that software. And that's a good thing. I think that's good.
So you were saying before the enforcement for open source projects is being told off, I think you said. So it doesn't seem like, why do you need to do this if you're only going to be told off if you don't? Or did I misunderstand?
What do you mean that open source software compliant?
I think that you talked about enforcement.
Oh, enforcement. All we have to do is, if you are a steward, you have to have a way to contact for security bugs, and if you have fixed security bugs, you have to report that you fixed security bugs. That's the two things you have to do. If you do not do that as a steward, you can become non-compliant and they can fine you or something like that.
Okay. So there are actual consequences.
For a steward, not for an individual.
Okay.
So the Linux Foundation has to abide by these rules, right? Mozilla has to abide by these rules. Me and Linus as an individual working for them don't have to abide by the rules because I can't be fined, the Linux Foundation can be fined. That's the legal entity issue there, as far as that goes. So you as an individual contributor, not even a problem. Yeah.
But as somebody not in the EU, well, I'm in the EU right now, but who is going to fine me? You know, the Canadian Revenue Agency?
I don't know. I do not know how the enforcement of this across outside EU jurisdiction is going to work. I don't understand. How does it work today when you import physical devices and paint and ingredients? I don't know. There's some type of enforcement somewhere. Yeah, international sanctions. Yeah, fun. That was a different talk I had to give.
One more question. How is it going to affect the life cycle policy you have on a product? Because you have an end of life on products, and you can say that it's going to just be supported for a very short time, for instance. Does the CRA regulate that in some way?
So lifetime of products is covered under a different EU law that is in effect right now. So there's an EU law for mobile devices and laptops and those things that you have to be supported for 7 years after the last time it was sold in the market, or it's 5 years. Anyway, it's a long time. That law is in effect today. So as a manufacturer of a device, you have to abide by those rules today. The CRA does not talk about how long it has to be supported, because again, it's covered by other laws. But there is something in there, I don't remember. As far as us, we can say, and we will say, oh, we fixed our security bugs in a new version. You must upgrade. It's a good thing.
So, in response to the gentleman asking about the manufacturers, most open source projects are used by a great many manufacturers. All of whom, you can get into weird things for the first one to use a version that has a bug in it or something like that. But for the most part, you should be able to get together with other manufacturers in the same boat, pool resources, and get something done. Should, but that is something that is open. There have been trade associations, chambers of commerce, and things like that, in which such proposals might work well.
So I think part of the ANISA reporting platform and the CSRTs are going to do that. Because as a manufacturer, you have to report to them that there's been a vulnerability. If they will see this crossing other manufacturers and it isn't fixed yet, they should be the one responsible for doing that. There's something odd in there that people are saying you have to contact the CSRT closest to you. Me being in the Netherlands, I had to get out a little map and figure out which of the 3 was closest. I don't know how well that's going to work. And then there's some weird things about translating in other languages. Don't worry about that. You have to do that, things like that. But it's getting weird.
And who in this process decides what a vulnerability is?
Oh, you missed the other term. Vulnerability known by whom? Whether I know a vulnerability or you know a vulnerability or somebody else. That is being worked out. Yeah, what is a vulnerability, what isn't? Yes, that's still being worked out. As far as that goes, so they are working on standards for this stuff. Standards is voluntary, and I was told voluntary is in quotes, because the way governments work was there's like, oh, here's this lovely voluntary standard out there, we're gonna actually write it into a regulation over here, and that means you have to follow that voluntary standard over there. A lot of these standards aren't gonna be finished until after the CRA goes into effect. We're participating in the standards process. Case Cook is doing a lot of work on this stuff, which is great. I was doing a little bit, then I've been traveling. Case is doing most of the work. The Linux Foundation has hired some people to also do some work. There's some other really good open source developers who know their stuff that are participating as well. The standards, some of them will be finished by the end of this month, but then they will take a year before they get ratified. So we will be able to see them. They'll be public. We can complain about them or not. A lot of them is just risk management stuff. It's not that complex. It's like, again, if you have multiple users, you have to not have a password that can be easily guessed or written on the bottom, something like that.
But don't you fear that some LLMs will be used just to fill the security report address like we are already seeing? Because I mean that it could be a way to completely fool the manufacturer with completely wrong reports that they will have to invest time to just sort out.
Yes, I think they are not aware of how much crap we get reported to us. My also other interesting thing is as an open source steward, you have to react you should react if a CSIRT contacts you. And based on, everybody knows they get lovely phishing emails, and I get some really good ones. How do I know if it's a real person contacting me or not? They have to work through those types of things. They'll work it out by the end of December in 2 years.
Just a practical question. Many developers who work for non-open source companies sometimes request to publish open source software they developed during their work on this company. Don't you fear that these big companies, who are not always well aware of the regulations, will say, oh, we don't want you to publish anything in open source because we don't want to deal with the hassle of security fixes, including if the developer is leaving the company, we have to maintain the software, yada, 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 even if it's not necessarily true.
Yes.
Isn't it going to be an issue, a barrier to publishing?
So this has come up many times. So a company can be a manufacturer and a steward. And as a steward, again, provide an email address, provide a way to report security bugs. That's all they have to do as a steward. If they're just releasing an open source tool, then again, you are over there, you're not even really a steward. You're just an open source contributor and publish something. You're not even considered that. So the goal is for that not to affect companies. They should still be able to publish that stuff. They're saying your full role as a manufacturer is not required as that. You should be fine. So hopefully no. Again, lawyers will react in the strictest way to start with. I think as time goes on, it's going to become not an issue at all. And as I'm running out of time, but I'll put this up. There is a bunch of other resources out there. All my slides are online. The top one is good. There's some free stuff. The Open Regulatory Working Group FAQ. The Eclipse Foundation, Apache. Oh, I want to call out Apache. The Apache Foundation's done a lot of help here. They've really done some good work. They're in the whole EU process. They've done a wonderful job. Eclipse has helped out as well, but Apache, I can't say enough good things about them. There's a whole bunch of documentation out there on how this stuff, the FAQ is not finished yet. It will be finished eventually. The Linux Foundation CRA site will have more stuff on it, again, with a nice form letter for you to tell people to buzz off. It'll be good. So, again, but more questions. That was my last slide. I just want to make sure that was there. Alice.
So what about cases where, let's say I negotiate with my manager, hey, can I spend work time on maintaining this open source project that I also do next to my work. Does that what happens then? Does that mean that now suddenly my employer is responsible for this thing as well?
No, because your employer is not manufacturing that. It's just, again, it should be covered under the original thing. You're just contributing. You are getting paid, but you're just contributing. Fine. It's okay. Now, if your company goes and now sells consulting services based on that, then they are a manufacturer, which is another issue. So again, I'll call it Bay Libra. The individuals who are contributing, wonderful. Bay Libra as the manufacturer has followed rules of manufacturer. Again, Curl, Daniel as an individual, fine. As this consulting company, manufacturer, should be okay. Behind you.
Is it really that clear when a company has started monetizing software? Because software supply chains are pretty complex.
It is clear when you put software on the market that you need a CRA mark or not. Yeah, it becomes pretty clear. They've defined it pretty easily. It's pretty obvious. You're a legal entity receiving money for things like that. You're just receiving donations for keeping your open source project alive. No, you're fine.
Okay.
But if you're working as a consultant, yeah. It's not as technical people, we like dissecting the law. Law is gray until it's enforced. It's the way it's written. The goal here and the intent is not to trip up anybody in this room. The goal and intent is also to hold the big companies liable when they release open source software as part of that, because they want that not to be an end run around the CRA. So merging those two things together has made this really wiggly line in the middle. They are on our side. I've talked to the representatives from the different countries that created this law. They understand open source. They understand how the world runs on open source. They don't want to see it get harmed by this at all. So I have faith in that.
So I also have another question. So there was this one instance where some random company came to me, hey, we want a little bit of help with this open source project, and if I then accepted a little bit of money of that, I mean, it was not enough money that I would have to create a legal entity under Danish law. There's some sort of threshold before you have to do that.
I don't know. To be fair, the role of a manufacturer for things like that for a consultant is actually very simple. If you look at the requirements, so you have to publish an SBOM. Great. Here's all the software that's in the thing I gave you. Here's all the versions in the thing I gave you. And if it's on the market as a product, then that's a different issue than the consulting one. It's really not that much overhead for you. So again, Bay Libra has nothing to fear from this. You as an individual consultant getting paid from this has nothing to fear. Daniel, working with Curl, has nothing to fear from this. Again, another form they fill out and you're good to go. It shouldn't be that hard. Maybe take a little bit more money to fill out that form.
I mean, it looks like something great news for us, because like manufacturers, if they want to use a proprietary component, like say VMware, they're really going to have to put big pressure on the proprietary vendors, because they have no way of fixing stuff, or like an NVIDIA blob. So it's great, actually. Like, I mean, all manufacturers will be really pushed to use open source only, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's going to make more companies use open source, because then they can control their destiny. If you're relying on a closed source product, yeah, it's going to be interesting. That being said, Apple and Microsoft were involved in the creation of this, and they were happy about it too. So they're very happy to charge people money for their stuff to meet with these requirements. And both Apple and Microsoft use a lot of open source products too. And famously, all the Apples have Linux in that modem. So.
For projects that are licensed under a permissive license like MIT, you can make a proprietary derivative work. If you do that, you still have to put it in the SBOM as like the original one.
There is nothing here that says the license matters whether you're covered or not. So MIT, you take it closed source, you're a manufacturer, great. You're not a manufacturer, it doesn't matter. The license doesn't matter here. Now, I don't know of any closed sourced, you're not an open source steward. Open source is defined in the law as open source license, right? So MIT is fine, whatever. Apache, good. So it's not a problem. So, but closed source software is covered under the same law. All software is covered under this law.
It could be hidden if you change the name, then you don't know that an MIT component is used, basically.
But again, your manufacturer has to spit out an SBOM with all the software that's in it. Whether they rename it, that's up to them. They're now liable for it. Ideally, these guys are going to have so much work, they're not going to be renaming things. It's going to be fun to watch.
Thank you.
And all right, I'm out of time. Thank you very much.